Okay, so there's a clear-cut case for data investment, but what does that mean in practice for some of the big challenges of our time: climate, the environment, health, and stability? Please welcome the Head of Data Science and Health, Tariq Khan, the Economy Division Director of the UN Environment Program, Sheila Agarwal-Khan, and the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operations, Anne Witkowski. Thank you all very much for being with us this morning. Tariq, let me start with you. You're leading on data in one of the world's largest foundations focused on science for urgent health challenges. How are you helping to unlock the power of data for health and well-being?
Thanks, Folly. I mean, when you work in the field of science and health, it becomes clear every day that data saves lives. We saw this in the first months of the pandemic when we supported the recovery trial in the UK. It turned the national health system into a giant clinical trial, generating evidence for the therapies that would actually help improve lives. What are we doing now? Three things I'll talk about: data, tools, and talent. So the first is you have to invest in data. You can't do data science without data to do science on, right? So for instance, over the last 3 years, we've invested something like $30 million across 30 different countries in boosting the capacity of labs to actually sequence pathogen genomes and then share that data with the global community so we can understand how pandemics and other infectious diseases work. As Dr. Tedros says, viruses move fast, but data can move faster. The second thing is tools. Having data without tools is like having a bag of nails with no hammer, right? So in the next couple of months, we'll share, for instance, investment in the first randomized control trial of an early warning system for dengue in Vietnam. So this is a climate-sensitive infectious disease, but this tool will allow people to get ahead of the curve of these endemics and respond to them. And lastly, talent. You need people to put all this together. So we're pleased. Yesterday, we announced a $6.8 million grant to data.org, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, and JPAL South Asia on creating a new set of hubs in Africa and India, training data scientists to work on these problems. So those three things combined: data, tools, and talent is how we put this stuff into practice.
All right, data, tools, and talent. Sheila, let me come to you. We've seen the devastating effects of climate change all around us. We're seeing it every day. You're helping lead UNEP, the UN Environment Program, and I know that UNEP recently adopted its first digital strategy. Why is that a priority for you?
So we're in a world where, without the data, you can't really take these issues to another space. So let me just take climate change. With UNDP and the World Meteorological Organization, we've established a systematic observations finance facility, which is trying to collect the data. As Tariq says, at the very least, you need the data sets. And the data that would connect climate and weather data in LDCs and SIDS, so basically to help with early warning on climate impacts. But we're using that kind of data gathering process for air pollution. We have 25,000 sensors actually put by governments across the globe on what is the state of air pollution. We're working with Google and Microsoft on the biodiversity and ecosystem side and data. I guess there are some challenges that we're seeing. First, to be able to have data interoperability. Two, to be able to deal with some of the intellectual property rights, the privacy issues and all. We see the need for standards to be in place so that, because on the one hand, data is energy intensive, and that's something that most people don't even think about. How do you keep the material footprint and the greenhouse gas emission footprint down? At the same time, have standards for interoperability and all. And our next stage is to try to connect to the other agendas, the health agenda, and also that the data becomes more usable by countries looking to see what does it mean for jobs, for investment, for health issues as we go forward.
All right, Anne, let me come to you. Your work is focused on preventing crises, promoting stability and social cohesion in some of the world's toughest environments. How are data-driven approaches supporting these efforts?
Well, thank you. The role of data in our work is just so important to what we do, and we're committed to using data-driven approaches to help inform our insights for decision-making. One specific way we're doing that is under the U.S. strategy to prevent conflict and promote stability. That's a framework that we've undertaken with a number of partners around the globe to build increased resiliency to some of the challenges that we've been talking about here. And we can use data, it can help us as decision makers in a variety of ways. So first of all, it can help us understand linkages that we need to appreciate in order to build better solutions. So for example, linkages between violence and stability.
Right.
Linkages are on cross-cutting issues like health, like gender, like climate change. It can help us to inform, to develop, and to adapt our programs over time, and to help us learn. And then finally, as we've already discussed, it can help us to anticipate challenges before they arise, so that we can build better approaches working together with our partners around the globe.
Right. Tariq, Anne talked about linkages there. The risks are also interconnected, right? How do you work across silos?
Absolutely. I mean, I think of data as a great bridge between silos. So the example I always think about is a study we funded earlier this year looking at the effects of climate change on mental health. So these researchers in South Africa, they were able to combine geospatially referenced data on natural disasters, geospatially referenced data on mental health, and they found that if you were exposed to natural disasters over a decade, you were 20% more likely to experience depression, right? And those numbers are even higher if you are a woman, if you're black, or if you're from a poorer socioeconomic or educational background. So connecting data between fields in this way is a great way to break down those silos.
Your thoughts about this, Sheila? Connecting data between fields. Crucial, isn't it?
Unbelievably crucial. I'll give you one example, air pollution. From an environmental side, we say, oh my goodness, we have information which says that it creates lots of health impacts. But actually, there's not enough correlation that is coming through at let's say, the very ground level. So, you have global information, but what countries want is to be able to see what are the health impacts that are coming from air pollution, affecting, absenteeism from work, affecting the medical costs that the government has to endure. And so there is an economic cost to air pollution that is not necessarily factored into government's decision making. And connecting things like, just as one example, health and air pollution data could be quite critical.
Mm-hmm. Quite critical. Your thoughts about this, the interconnection?
Absolutely. Well, it's become very clear to us that with, say, the COVID pandemic and severe weather incidents, droughts, heat waves, flooding, that we can no longer separate public health and climate change from what we would consider the factors that we would generally consider as we look at stability challenges like poor governance, like violence, or like corruption. So pulling these pieces together for us is extremely important because they are deeply interconnected, and we have to do more to work across these disciplines. Policymakers do that, but we can do better, and we must do better, and data can facilitate that cooperation.
Right. Tariq, what is your advice to organizations that are just starting their journey on data and this digital journey? What is your key advice to them?
Oh, good.
Of how they go about this?
That's a great question. I think my main takeaway would be don't think this has to be so complicated. There are some very simple things that organizations can do to get things moving. I mean, we talked about them already. Investing in foundational data, one of the highest return on investment activities you can do. Investing in those tools, investing in those talents. Just get going. Don't overcomplicate it.
Right. What are some of the developments that you're most excited about, Sheila, at UNEP when it comes to data?
I guess, well, one of them is our World Environment Situation Room. It has the promise of being able to have a data set there that, across many different issues, from climate to air pollution to water pollution, that could then connect to other data sets from other institutions and really allow for this interoperability, provided, of course, that you have standards in place that allow data sharing, that allow issues on privacy, ethics, and all to be dealt with. I think it's a very exciting space.
It is exciting times, isn't it? And let me come to you for the final word. I know that the US has teamed up with Germany, the Netherlands, the European Union, and Finland to invest in the Complex Risk Analytics Fund. Why? How does that help, you think?
Yes, the United States is pleased to be joining with the UN and our other countries to join this multilateral pooled resource to access data. There are two reasons really that we've done this. One, it allows us in a more efficient way to access a greater amount of data, and that serves our purposes as decision makers to give us the kind of data that we want to facilitate our data-driven decision making. And secondly, in a pooled resource, we are looking at a common picture, a common operating picture, if you will. And as we are cooperating in the international community to try to address common challenges, that also facilitates our cooperation as decision makers.
Thank you so much for your insight. Thank you all. Tariq Khan, Sheila Agarwal-Khan, and Anne Witowski. Thank you for sharing your perspectives with us this morning.